Her body was too big to reproduce, so they cast her out. But only one human made her a mother. They always laughed when she entered the square. Not just the children, though their laughter was the sharpest. It was the adults, too. Older women with narrow shoulders and finely sculpted jaws, their delicate voices laced with venom disguised as amusement. Too tall to carry anything but shame, one murmured. She must have been meant for another planet, said another, one with no ceilings. They didn't even try to hide their snickers anymore. After all, she wasn't one of them. Not really. Just a visitor. A genetic error. 8 feet, 2 inches. Juno knew every inch of it, knew how her head skimmed the glowing archways of Velraya's central pavilion, knew how her hips barely fit between the public transport rows, knew how her hands, her long-fingered, calloused, unpretty hands, curled protectively around her pack, not because she was afraid, but because the stairs made her feel like a zoo exhibit. "Look," a child whispered, tugging at its mother's sleeve. "Is she broken?" The woman didn't answer. She just smiled, pitying and cold. "She's human," she said gently. "They don't build them right." Juno kept walking. Her boots echoed too loudly on the biostone. Even the ground seemed to betray her, unable to carry her weight without broadcasting it. The thud, thud, thud of her steps felt like a punishment. She ducked beneath the lattice arch. Again. The same one she'd hit her forehead on her first week here. The scar had healed, but she still flinched at the memory. Someone laughed. "They should have brought a shorter model," came a voice from the seated group near the herb vendor. "I heard humans came in normal sizes, too." "She's not unwell," another voice said in the same breathless tone people used when trying not to sound cruel. And failing. Just unparable. And there it was again. That word, unparable. They didn't mean romantically. Not here. Not on Velraya. They meant biologically. She couldn't carry. She was, by all official measurements, an empty shell. Juno's reproductive lattice didn't respond to the pairing protocol used by the Velrayan match matrices. It was the first thing they scanned upon her arrival, before they even showed her where the bathing quarters were. No sync activity, no fertility resonance, no capacity for neural maternal bonding. "She has no frequency," the tech had said, blinking at the results. "No harmonic window," another corrected. In short, her womb did not sing. On Velraya, that was everything. It meant her strength, her intelligence, her skills. None of it mattered. Her towering frame, so revered on Earth's athletic circuits, was now a punchline, a malfunction, a burden they were forced to accommodate, but never embrace. And still she walked the glittering streets of the alien city every day, enduring the whispers, pretending she didn't hear the wordless apologies in the translator drone's softened tones. Subject Juno of Earth, human female, class, unlinked. She hated that title most of all. Unlinked. Not individual, not diplomatic envoy, just a body they had no use for. She paused on the bridge overlooking the lower terraces. The sun was falling, twin moons casting a pale violet glow across the glowing flora that shimmered along the water's edge. From here, the world looked quiet, beautiful even. But the silence only deepened the ache in her chest. Back home, she'd been a captain, a team leader, a woman with command in her voice and weight in her step. Here, she was an anomaly to be tolerated, a walking reminder that humans were too crude to fit into something as elegant as Velrayan bioculture. A gust of wind caught the edge of her jacket. She pulled it tighter, though the temperature didn't warrant it. Her reflection shimmered in the water below. Too tall, too wide, all harsh lines and heavy limbs. She tried to imagine herself as they saw her, oversized, ungraceful, biologically irrelevant. The grief was quiet, not sharp, not anymore. Just a constant background hum, like tinnitus of the soul. That evening she took the long path back to her quarters, past the cliffside gardens, through the edge of the unlit grove where few citizens wandered at night. She liked the silence there. It didn't judge her. She reached the overlook, sat heavily on the stone edge and let her legs dangle into the dark. Her back hurt. Her ankles throbbed. The pack she carried dug into her shoulder blades. She hadn't eaten since morning. She rarely remembered to anymore. But the hunger had dulled into something more manageable than attention. Above her, the stars flickered. Different constellations than Earth. Alien patterns, unfamiliar stories. She wondered if any of them spoke of women like her. Too large, too strong, too visible to be loved. Then, movement. She turned her head. Down the path, half silhouetted by the glow of a grounded Terra scanner, stood a man. Human. Shorter than her, maybe 5'11" by the looks of it. Quiet posture. Hands tucked into the folds of a field coat. His hair was dark, windswept, and his eyes, when they met hers, didn't flicker with curiosity or discomfort, just quiet recognition. He didn't approach. He didn't wave, but he didn't look away either. Later, she would remember that moment. The silence. The way the stars blinked in witness. The look on his face that said, "I see you," without saying anything at all. But at that moment, all she could do was lower her eyes. Not out of shame, but surprise. She wasn't used to being seen without being measured. The man stayed a few seconds longer, then turned and walked away. She stayed on the ledge long after, her hand resting over her chest, as if trying to memorize what it had felt like when someone didn't flinch from her shadow. She didn't know his name, not yet. But something in her had shifted. Not healed, not softened, but cracked. And cracks, as she'd learned, were where light got in. Juno didn't sleep that night. She lay still on the narrow cot in her assigned dwelling, Spartan, square, and sterile. The walls hummed faintly from the power core below. A single vine from the exterior architecture had crept in through the ceiling vent, pulsing with soft blue light, like a heartbeat she didn't recognize. She watched it for hours. Sleep wouldn't come. Not after the way he'd looked at her. Not stared, not assessed, not ogled. Just looked. She couldn't remember the last time someone had seen her and not immediately calculated her size, her potential, her threat. That man, Rowan, if she remembered correctly, had watched her like he was reading a language he only half understood but desperately wanted to. That shouldn't have mattered. Not here. Not on this planet where her usefulness was a daily negotiation and her worth was a diplomatic fiction. And yet it stuck. The stillness in his posture, the absence of pity, the way he hadn't looked away. It burrowed under her ribs like a slow burn. The next morning, her limbs felt heavier than usual. She rolled her shoulder until it cracked, reached for the hydration unit and swallowed 2 gulps of filtered mineral water, skipped breakfast again, she wasn't hungry, and pulled on her uniform, another day of silent relevance. She made her way toward the lower quadrant, where mineral scanners had malfunctioned overnight, standard maintenance run, hands-on, dirty, her kind of work. The corridors were less crowded this early, fewer eyes, fewer whispers. The stone tiles underfoot were slick with dew condensation. Her boots squeaked once and she winced. Every sound she made always seemed louder than it should have been. The entrance to the mineral sector was lined with curved obsidian spires. Elegant, like everything on Velraya, but unkind in how they forced her to stoop to enter. She ducked, stepped through, and found herself, unexpectedly, not alone. Rowan was already there. He knelt by the scanner core, elbow deep in the opened housing unit, tools scattered in orderly precision beside him. He didn't look up when she entered. Juno hesitated. She could leave. She could turn around, request reassignment, pretend this was a misfile. Instead, she cleared her throat. Rowan glanced up, eyes blinking in the soft light. No surprise, no awkward fumble, just that same calm, steady gaze. "Didn't expect help," he said simply. "I didn't know you'd be here," she replied. Silence settled between them, not sharp, not cold, just waiting. Rowan sat back on his heels, wiping his hands on a rag. Scanners cycling wrong. Biofeedback loops overloaded. Probably a thermal bridge collapse. She nodded. "Can I assist?" "You know your way around Velrayan wiring?" "I know how to keep my fingers from frying," she said, "most days." A flicker of a smile, barely there. He shifted to make room. She dropped to her knees beside him, the stone digging into her legs, but she didn't complain. Her hands moved to the auxiliary panel, fingers scanning for heat signatures, feeling for vibration patterns. The work grounded her, mechanical, predictable. Nothing laughed at her here. They worked in tandem. No need to explain every move, no interruption. Just tools passed back and forth, the occasional nod. Time thinned. The silence grew companionable. At one point, their hands brushed, both reaching for the same cable clamp. She froze. So did he, but neither pulled away. Her eyes lifted. His had already found hers. It was barely a moment. A breath caught between them. But something shifted. It wasn't hunger. Not yet. It wasn't even longing. It was recognition. The kind that comes not from sight, but from quiet survival. The scanner hissed back to life. Lights flickered green. The hum stabilized. They stood. She towered over him, a full head and shoulders taller. The difference should have made things awkward. But he didn't shrink, didn't joke, just looked up at her like it was normal, like she was normal. Juno shifted the tool belt on her hip. "Thanks," he said, voice low. "I could say the same. You usually work alone?" "I don't usually get assigned with humans." He tilted his head slightly. "They think you can't pair. They think a lot of things." "I don't," he said, and then added with deliberate softness, "I watch." She held his gaze. "Why?" she asked. "Because you move like someone who's forgotten how to be seen." She swallowed hard. The room felt smaller. He stepped back, not away, just giving her space, noticing, respecting. "I'll log the repair," he said. She nodded. He turned, pausing briefly before he left. "You're not unpairable, Juno," he said. "You just don't fit in the cages they built." Then he was gone. She stood alone in the humming silence, one hand resting on the warm scanner housing, her heart pounding louder than any machinery. No one had ever said that to her. Not without a sneer. Not without pity. And suddenly, for the first time in weeks, she remembered what hope felt like. It was a strange, vulnerable thing, but she didn't look away from it. Not this time. The next few days passed in silence, but not the kind that hurt. Juno resumed her work without fanfare. Assignments came and went. Drones buzzed through corridors. The city pulsed with its usual quiet elegance. She ate when she remembered, drank when her vision blurred, and stretched her legs on the long walks between sectors. But something had changed. She found herself listening for footsteps that matched Rowan's gait. She noticed the way certain doors opened just a little slower when he walked in behind her. She noticed that, for the first time in weeks, she wasn't avoiding eye contact. He never sought her out, never forced conversation, but he was there, always quietly, always steady, always noticing. On the fourth day, she received a temporary reassignment to the outer agricultural terraces. Not a punishment, just a task no one else wanted. Too far, too exposed, too primitive. She accepted without comment. By mid-morning, she was hiking alone down the moss-slicked ridge that led to the lower basin, pack strapped tight to her back, the weight of tools pressing down across her shoulders. The air changed here, less refined, less filtered. The scent of soil replaced the sterile ozone tang of the upper city. The horizon opened, wide and unsymmetrical, stretching into fields of bioluminescent stalks, swaying under distant sunbeams. She liked it. It felt unprocessed, uncurated. When she reached the main cultivation hub, a small, tented structure tucked beneath a jutting cliff, she was surprised to see someone already there, head bent over a failing irrigation console. Rowan, of course. He looked up as she approached, didn't smile, just nodded once. "System's jammed," he said. "Filter mesh collapsed." She set her pack down beside him without a word. They worked for hours. No translator drones, no sterile command tones, just fingers in wet soil, knees in the mud, breath sinking through exertion. Her sleeves were rolled high, biceps marked with dirt and sweat. Rowan's face was streaked with grime, hair pushed back by a band he'd cut from the hem of his shirt. Juno liked how human he looked like that. Unfinished. Not perfectly pressed. Not shrink-wrapped for approval. He looked like someone who'd learned to endure. Midway through the repair, the skies opened. Rain fell fast, not hard. Warm and constant, soaking them in seconds. They didn't rush, didn't complain. The crops needed the water anyway. She stood, back arching as she stretched out her spine, water cascading down the curve of her neck. Her uniform clung to her body, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't think about how she must look. Rowan stood beside her, chest rising slowly with the rain. He didn't speak, just turned his head and looked at her like a question answered. "You don't flinch," she said softly, not turning. "No reason to. Most men do, or stare. I don't need to measure you to see you." She exhaled, slow and tight. "I used to be seen for what I could lift, what I could break, then what I couldn't carry." "You've carried yourself," he said. "That counts." They said nothing more. Later, after the rain had stopped and their work was done, they sat on the edge of the cliffs, overlooking the glowing plains. The clouds split apart in the distance, letting shafts of violet sunlight dance across the valley. The light caught on her wet hair. Rowan handed her a protein bar from his rations. She took it, biting off a piece too fast. Choked, coughed once. He said nothing, just passed her his water tube. Thanks, she muttered, cheeks flushing. You eat like someone who forgets she's allowed to need things. She blinked. The words hit harder than they should have. Doesn't everyone? Some just forget how to ask. She looked down at her hands, strong, calloused, dirt under every nail. What did you leave behind? She asked, voice low. Rowan didn't answer right away. His fingers curled around the rim of the rock, knuckles pale. A family that talked over me, he said at last. Rooms I never quite filled. I was the smallest, quietest, easiest to forget. That's why I came here. I thought maybe, in a world this far from home, I could matter in silence. She turned to face him fully. I was always too loud, she said, even when I didn't speak. My body did the talking for me. I tried to fold, tried to vanish, but you can't hide an 8'2" shadow. He studied her. Not her size, not her shape, her. You don't need to shrink. I don't know how to stop trying. Let me remind you. The words weren't romantic. They weren't flirtatious. They were something more dangerous. True. That night, as they parted at the edge of the ridge, he didn't touch her. But his hand brushed her arm, just once, fingers glancing across the curve of her elbow. She didn't flinch. Not this time. When she returned to her quarters, soaked to the skin raw from work, she didn't wipe the mud from her face right away. She looked in the mirror and saw something unfamiliar. Not someone small, not someone broken, someone still here. Someone beginning to feel real again. The wind smelled like stone dust and wet copper. Juno stood at the edge of the lower terraces, the slope beneath her feet soft from the morning rains. The clouds were thin today, filtered sunlight spilling across the mist-veiled valley in long silver sheets. The light painted her skin like metal. She didn't move. Behind her, footsteps crunched over the gravel. Light ones, familiar. Rowan. He didn't speak as he approached. She didn't turn to greet him. They didn't need to anymore. He stopped a pace behind her, waited. I didn't expect to be reassigned here again, she said. Neither did I, he replied. She smiled faintly. You think they're watching? They always are. But maybe they're not sure what they're looking at. She turned to face him then, slowly. Her body cast a long shadow over his, the difference in height undeniable. But Rowan never bristled beneath it, never made it feel like a joke or a novelty. Do I intimidate you? She asked, eyes steady. No, he said without pause. But I think you scare the people who built this place to feel safe in sameness. She inhaled sharply. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. They moved to the slope's edge where the soil was warm, sitting side by side on an outcropping of root-covered stone. Below them, iridescent crops shimmered in slow waves, breathing with the rhythm of the wind. Juno stretched her legs out, boots caked in drying mud. She rolled up her sleeves. The sun kissed her forearms, pale scars catching the light. Some faded, some recent. Most came from before Velraya. Rowan offered her half of a nutrient bar. She took it. They ate in silence for a while. The kind of silence that only exists between people who have decided not to fill space with noise. Then he said, without looking at her, "Why did you come here?" She didn't answer immediately. My file said cultural bridge specialist. My real job was to make the others comfortable with me being around, she said. To prove that someone like me, big, blunt, visibly human, could be non-threatening. And did you succeed? No. Her voice was dry. But I played the part, smiled when they asked about Earth's gravity, let them run their diagnostics, laughed when they made jokes about mating compatibility like I wasn't in the room. Rowan's jaw tensed. They thought I couldn't hear the drones whispering. Non-viable strain, she added. Like I was deaf along with being useless. He turned to her. You're not useless. She met his gaze. You don't even know what I am. I know you're still here. That counts for something. She stared at him, hard, long, like she was trying to decide if he meant it. He didn't look away. Back on Earth, she said after a beat. I was something. Captain of my school's gravity ball team, top of the class. They called me the Atlas Girl, said I carried our wins on my shoulders. He raised an eyebrow. They meant it as a compliment, she continued, until they ran my bioscan and found out I couldn't carry anything else. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I never wanted kids until they told me I couldn't have them. Then it was all I could think about, what my body couldn't do, what it failed to be. Rowan didn't try to comfort her. He didn't say it wasn't true or that it didn't matter. He simply said, "I'm sorry." It was enough. She leaned back on her elbows, letting the sun warm her face. "What about you?" she asked after a while. "What brought you here?" He hesitated, not out of shame, but because his answer was fragile. "I was tired of being small," he said. That surprised her. She turned to him, puzzled. "I don't mean in height," he added, "though I've always been the smallest in the room." He flexed one hand slowly, like remembering something. "I come from a family of men who measured themselves in decibels, volume, violence. I didn't fit." She said nothing, watching his profile. "They told me I was too soft, that I'd get crushed out here. And maybe I would have if I hadn't learned that softness doesn't mean weak, just unarmored." He looked at her then. "And sometimes the things without armor are the ones that survive longest, because they know how to bend." Juno felt her throat tighten. He added more quietly, "I didn't come here to be someone. I came here to stop being invisible." Her voice was barely a whisper. "And now? I see you," he said. "That's a start." They sat in silence again, but this time it was different. Not avoidance, not distance, just two people letting memory breathe. The wind moved through the trees above them. A violet-winged insect hovered, then drifted off. The sun fell a little lower, and the sky blushed faintly toward dusk. Juno shifted. Her shoulder brushed against his. She didn't move away. He didn't either. Later, when they returned to their temporary base camp, their hands brushed again as they passed through the curtain of vines covering the entrance. This time, he didn't pull away. And she didn't let go. The past hadn't vanished. But now it had company. Someone else to carry it with. Night settled over the base camp like a soft exhale. The wind had quieted. Even the insects had fallen still. A hush wrapped itself around the outer ridges, not empty, but full of the things not yet said. Inside the tent, the lanterns were low, casting warm amber shadows across the walls. The scent of burnt resin and wet stone lingered in the canvas. Juno sat with her knees drawn loosely to her chest, back resting against one of the structural poles. Her hands were dirty. She hadn't bothered to clean them. She didn't care. Across from her, Rowan sat cross-legged, sleeves rolled, his shirt stained with soil and rain. He was watching her, not intrusively, not like someone with an agenda, just seeing her, letting his eyes rest where they wanted to. And she let him. She didn't shrink this time. Didn't shift to make herself smaller, quieter, easier. For once she wanted to be fully visible, even if it scared her. "You're quiet," she said. "So are you," he answered. They didn't smile. They didn't have to. Later she moved to her bedroll, not saying a word. She sat, unlaced her boots, peeled off her damp outer shirt. The air clung to her skin like breath. Her undershirt was damp with sweat and dried salt. It smelled like her, real and human. She didn't look over when he crossed the tent and knelt beside her, but she felt him, not touching, not yet, just there. Juno turned her head. Rowan's gaze rose slowly, from her arms to her throat to her eyes. He didn't reach. He didn't rush. Instead, he said quietly, "Do you want this?" Her breath caught. No one had ever asked her like that, not even when they should have. She nodded, once, then again slower. "I don't know how to be gentle," she whispered. "Not with my body." "I do," he said. The first time their lips met, it wasn't seamless. Her mouth was broader than his, her hands larger. When she cupped his face, her fingers wrapped easily around the back of his neck, thumb resting just below his jawline. His hands came to her hips, not possessive, anchoring, assuring. Juno pulled back, breathing hard. "Tell me if it's too much." "It's not," he murmured. "I'm still here." She shifted, her legs folding to either side of him as she slowly settled in his lap. The weight of her was real, undeniable. Her thighs bracketed his with ease. Her back curved over his smaller frame, yet he didn't flinch beneath her. He held firm, held her. "Is this okay?" she asked, voice low, uncertain. He looked up at her from where he sat between her legs, his face level with her collarbone. "You feel like gravity," he said. "I want you to fall." They moved slowly. There was no choreography, no practiced rhythm, just two bodies learning the shape of one another. Juno's hands found the hem of his shirt, lifting it over his head. She touched his chest, fingers dragging across the trail of old scars and softness there. He reached for the hem of hers but stopped. looked at her. She nodded. The cloth peeled away. Her torso, long, powerful, thick with muscle, was marked by time, not grooming. Her body was a history, and for the first time, it didn't feel like something she had to defend. Rowan pressed a kiss just beneath her ribcage. She exhaled sharply, hand instinctively flying to his shoulder. "Sorry," he said, voice low. It's just, no one's ever touched me there," she murmured. "I can stop." "Don't." They lay down together. Her body stretched along his, enveloping him. He was cradled between her thighs now, looking up at her, breath already shallow. She moved carefully, learning the mechanics of her own strength in relation to his frame. Her hips rolled forward, testing. He grunted softly, head tilting back, hands gripping her sides. "You okay?" she asked. "More than okay," he breathed. She lowered herself further, and they connected, fully. The feeling took her breath away. Not just the sensation, though that was fierce, overwhelming, unexpected in its pleasure, but the fit. It didn't make sense. Their sizes shouldn't align, the angles shouldn't work, but they did. Her body, for all its scale and breadth, fit him like it had waited for this. She rocked her hips, slow and uncertain, watching his face. He gasped. His hands rose to cup her face, trembling slightly. "God, Juno," he whispered. "You feel like thunder." And she laughed, a real, full-bodied sound that made her spine arch and her walls clench around him. He groaned, bucking upward involuntarily. "You okay?" she asked again, teasing this time. "You're terrifying," he said, eyes dazed. "Good." The rhythm built gradually, bodies finding the language they hadn't known they were fluent in. She moved over him with strength and reverence, her legs framing his hips, her body a cathedral around him. Each motion was slow, deep, measured. He met her, breath for breath, groan for groan, and when release came, it came like a tide, quiet but vast, a shaking under the skin, a cry muffled in her throat. His arms tight around her, face buried against her chest as he shuddered, undone. Afterward, they stayed together, still joined, still breathing as one. Juno lowered her forehead to his, their sizes clashing and fitting all at once. "Was that?" He nodded before she could finish. "Yeah, it was." Later, curled against him with his head tucked under her chin, she felt the ache of her hips, the burn in her thighs, the slick between them drying against the cold air. But she didn't feel too big. She didn't feel like a mistake. She felt chosen. And for the first time in her life, she didn't wonder what it was like to be enough. She knew. She woke to warmth. Not sunlight. Velraya's dawn light filtered blue and quiet through the fiber walls of their shelter. Not the blankets. Those were half kicked off during the night. It was him, Rowan, still asleep, breath rising and falling against the curve of her ribs. One arm slung across her stomach like instinct, like gravity, like something that didn't need permission to be there. Juno lay still, afraid to shift, afraid to move. Not because she didn't want him near, because she didn't want the moment to vanish. His smaller body fit against hers like it had been designed for this. To disappear into the space she'd spent a lifetime being told was too large to hold anything. But now, there he was, held. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. She hadn't expected softness after everything. She hadn't expected quiet. But this was almost dangerous in how gentle it was. Rowan stirred. His eyelashes fluttered. She turned her head just slightly to look at him. "You're staring," he mumbled. "You drool in your sleep," she countered softly. "Only for women who break gravity laws." He said it without bravado, without teasing, like a truth he'd just uncovered in himself. She looked away before he could see the smile pulling at her lips. But then something shifted, a small cramp, low and strange. Not pain, but pressure. As though her body was trying to speak a language she hadn't used in years. She froze. Rowan noticed immediately. "What?" "Nothing," she lied. "Just sore." His hand moved gently to her back. "Too much?" "No." Her voice was low. It wasn't too much, not even close. But the twinge was real. Later, when they were up, when she was brushing soil from her boots, when he was boiling water for morning rations, she felt it again. A twist, deep and inexplicable. A flutter she dismissed as muscle strain, even though muscles didn't flutter. She didn't mention it. Not yet. She watched Rowan pour water into 2 cups, focused and calm, his sleeves pushed up, forearms smudged from last night's work, his collar slightly askew, his hands steady. He looked up. "What?" "Nothing," she said again. But in her stomach, something whispered, "Everything." The ache didn't go away. It lingered for days, low and dull, like the after-echo of a voice too old to remember. Not pain, not sharp, just present. A new weight at her center, a pressure she couldn't stretch out, couldn't run off, couldn't explain. Juno blamed the work. The ridge projects were labor-intensive, and though she carried twice as much as the other engineers, she rarely paused. She lifted, walked, climbed, and bent, over and over, ignoring the sting in her hips and the strange tightness in her chest. But by the fourth day, the excuses began to break apart. Her appetite had shifted, not vanished, just changed. She craved things that made no sense. Spicy root paste, saline blocks. Once she caught herself chewing the end of her glove. Salt. She wanted salt, not flavor, not taste, just minerals. At night, her skin felt electric, like her nerves were too close to the surface. Her breasts ached with a fullness that had no cause. Her stomach turned at sudden smells. Ozone, raw metal, the sterile tang of diagnostic gels. She said nothing to Rowan, not when she snapped at him for no reason, not when her vision blurred mid-task, not even when she woke up one night gasping, a sharp tightness curling beneath her ribs. He always noticed, but he didn't pry. He simply handed her water, adjusted the thermal blanket, rested a hand lightly on her shoulder until her breath slowed. She hated how easily he could see her unraveling. On the seventh day, she collapsed. Not dramatically, not publicly, just a quiet failure in her knees while carrying a coil spool across the worksite. The ground didn't hit hard, but it felt like it did. "Juno!" Rowan's voice, close. Then hands, warm, steady, lifting her up. "I'm fine," she snapped. "You're not." She tried to pull away, but the effort made her stomach roll. "Let me help." She let him. They walked in silence to the outpost clinic, a repurposed utility cabin with basic medical tech. Juno hated it immediately. It smelled like cold metal and recycled regret. Rowan keyed in the diagnostics himself. Refused to call a technician. "I trust your eyes," she said softly. He didn't look up. "You shouldn't have waited this long." She didn't answer. The scanner buzzed, then beeped, then blinked. And Rowan went still. "What is it?" she asked, voice flat. He didn't speak. "Rowan, what's wrong?" He turned the screen so she could see. Data streamed across in soft gold pulses. Numbers, hormone markers, levels she hadn't seen in years, some she'd never seen. One blinked in red, HCG-human chorionic gonadotropin. Elevated, rising, active. "No," she breathed. Rowan nodded once, slowly. "You're pregnant, Juno." The room shrank around her. She heard her own breathing like it was happening through water. Slow, warped, distant. "That's not possible," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know. I was classified non-viable, null reactive. They ran full sync scans. My reproductive field was dormant, no harmonic signature, no cellular receptivity. I remember." "So how?" Her hands were trembling. "How could this happen?" Rowan stepped forward cautiously. His voice was low but steady. "Maybe you were never dormant, just never in resonance with the scanners, or with them." She stared at the screen. Tiny pulses, fetal movement, primitive, but steady. Something was growing inside her, something her body had been told it could never hold, something that had defied the precision of Velrayan medicine, of algorithms, of cold declarations, a possibility. "I need to sit down," she whispered. He helped her to the bench, hands careful not to press too hard. She looked down at herself, not seeing her reflection, not seeing her shape, just feeling. "I didn't feel broken until they told me I was," she said. "You never were," he replied. "I believed them." "Me too." Her eyes flicked toward him. He smiled faintly. "Until now." The next hours blurred. Vitals, blood pressure, tissue scans. All confirmed the same thing. The pregnancy was real, viable, early but stable. No synthetic pairing, no induced resonance. Just her and him. Her body had done the thing it was never designed to do. And it wasn't hurting her. It was building something. That night, Juno didn't speak. She curled into her cot, wrapped in too many layers, but still cold. Not physically, but inside. Like the old walls she'd built to hold herself upright, didn't know how to stand in this new world. Rowan stayed nearby, not hovering, just present. Eventually she spoke, barely louder than a breath. "What if I'm not ready?" "You don't have to be," he said. "You just have to keep breathing." A silence passed. Then she asked, "Are you afraid?" "Yes," she nodded. "Good," he smiled. "Me too." They made her walk through the center of the city, not because it was required, not by law, not even by custom, but because the elders, those finely boned, glimmer-skinned women perched in their crystalline chambers, wanted to see her, see the body they had mocked, see the gait they had once called clumsy, see the womb they had dismissed as dead, now carrying life. Rowan walked beside her, not a step behind. She didn't hold his hand, but she felt the heat of it near hers, steady and unshaken. The path leading to the Hall of Accord was narrow, designed for slender Valrayan frames. Juno's shoulders brushed both sides. She didn't duck, not this time. The onlookers stood in silence, some with half-lidded eyes, others with mouths pressed thin, curiosity and discomfort mixing in the air like vapor. Children tilted their heads to look up at her, blinking. One pointed. "She's bigger now," the child said aloud. "She's carrying," someone else murmured. "Impossible," another snapped. But no one laughed. Not anymore. Inside, the hall was warm. Too warm. Deliberately uncomfortable. The elders believed temperature discomfort revealed sincerity. Juno remained still beneath the artificial heat. Her palms were damp. Her shirt clung to her spine, but her shoulders stayed high. Rowan stood to her right, silent. Ready. The matriarch of records, gray-eyed, draped in woven root fibers, stepped forward. Her voice was thin, almost musical. "You stand before us bearing a claim," she said, eyes narrowing, "that your body, deemed dormant, has conceived." "I do not make claims," Juno replied. Her voice didn't tremble. "I present facts." A soft murmur. The matriarch nodded to an attending medic who stepped forward with a scanner. The beam passed over Juno's abdomen. The screen bloomed with flickering data. "Fetal presence confirmed," the medic said quietly. "Heartbeat stable. 9 weeks gestation. No anomalies." Another whisper. Shock now. Confusion. Fear. The matriarch stared at the screen, then at Juno. "Your pairing was with this man?" She nodded. "Rowan, human. Normal height, no augmentation. No biological overlays?" "None," Rowan answered. Silence fell again. "But this violates established pairing logic," said a younger elder. "She failed all lattice synchronization protocols." "She didn't fail," Rowan said gently. "The protocols did." Another hush. Then from the back of the chamber a voice. "Why now?" It wasn't accusatory. It was simply lost. Juno turned toward the speaker, a tall Valrayan woman with pale blue veins running through her temples. She looked confused, almost childlike. "I don't know," Juno said honestly. "Maybe my body never needed permission, or maybe I just needed to stop being measured to start becoming." Rowan added, "Life isn't built from approval. It's built from trust. From what survives, they let them leave without ceremony. No applause, no sentence, no reprimand. Just a corridor of watchers, quiet and waiting." As Juno and Rowan stepped back into the daylight, the air felt different, sharper, clearer, a kind of stillness that only follows disruption. "They didn't deny it," she said softly. "They couldn't. They didn't accept it either. They will." She paused, rested a hand on her belly. "It's strange," she whispered. "For so long I thought I was a defect, something broken. But it was never about lack, it was about timing, about being seen." Rowan looked at her, eyes soft. "And now you're not just seen. You're becoming something they didn't know could exist." "A future," she said. He smiled. "Hours." Weeks passed. The whispers didn't stop, but they changed. Curiosity replaced cruelty. The term unparable stopped appearing in daily logs. Medical protocols were rewritten. Files once stamped with inactive were reopened. Others began coming forward, humans, outliers, the overlooked and cast aside, asking to be reevaluated. Juno didn't speak in public. She didn't become a symbol. She just lived. Worked when she had the energy. Rested when she didn't. Let Rowan hold her when the aches made her bite her tongue. He built a hammock from reclaimed cargo mesh, adjusting it daily to her growing weight. She let him braid her hair sometimes. In return, she made him eat on schedule. Neither called it love, but both knew. And late at night, when she lay on her side, one hand pressed to her rounding belly, she whispered stories to the life inside her, about broken scanners, twisted vines, cold-eyed women, and the quiet man who'd seen her before anyone else did. When the child stirred for the first time, no more than a flutter, she cried, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. She had always believed pain was the only way her body could speak. Now it spoke in movement, in warmth, in possibility. Juno was never small, not in body, not in spirit. And now no one could ignore her, not because she defied the rules, but because she redefined them, because she carried something new, not just within her womb, but in her voice, her stance, her presence. Something no one had ever prepared for, something the stars hadn't written down. A future they couldn't measure. The house was small, not by most standards. On Earth it might have been called generous, but for Juno, nothing ever felt sized to her. The door frame scraped the tops of her shoulders, and every time she reached for a hanging cabinet, her knuckles hit the ceiling. Even the furniture, specially requested, lightly reinforced, creaked faintly beneath her weight. But it was theirs. A two-room dwelling at the far edge of the northern grove, built into the slope of a hill where the light caught the trees just right in the morning. Rowan had chosen it for the view. Juno had chosen it for the quiet. Now, months later, it smelled like boiled grain, warm milk, and new skin. The baby lay against her chest, wrapped in a soft cloth woven from local vine fibers. She was small, half human, half mystery, all warmth and need. Her skin was pale bronze, with a faint iridescence that shimmered only in low light, like a secret encoded in her cells. Juno rocked her slowly, humming beneath her breath. Not a melody, really, just motion made sound. The child made a small sound in return, a sigh, then a fist to the mouth. "She's hungry again," she murmured. Rowan appeared in the doorway, ducking under the lintel out of habit. His hair was a mess. One sock was inside out. He looked like every man who hadn't slept through the night in weeks. "You just fed her," he said, rubbing one eye. "She disagrees." Juno smiled and passed him the baby. Their arms brushed, his narrow frame dwarfed again by hers. And yet, in every moment, they moved as if built for balance. When she stepped backward, he stepped forward. When she leaned down, he reached up. The size difference had become a rhythm. He cradled the baby in his forearm, his fingers dwarfed by her swaddled weight. "You always make it look easy," he said, "because you never saw the 30 years it wasn't." The home was simple. One low-slung bed, custom-built by a local carpenter after Rowan gave up trying to modify the prefabs. A desk wedged into the far wall, its surface cluttered with child-safe tools, old repair tablets, and one very chewed corner of a feeding bottle. Near the window stood the chair, her chair, built to hold her height, her weight, her frame. The only one that didn't groan when she sat, didn't tip when she leaned. He'd made it with his own hands, layer by layer, from reclaimed exocrate timber. She sat in it every night now, the baby tucked in her arms, the stars just outside the window. One evening, weeks later, Rowan was finishing the last of the night cleaning when he paused at the doorway. Juno was in the chair again, one foot planted flat on the floor, the other stretched out comfortably. Her body still bore the memory of pregnancy, her hips wider, her belly softer. But she sat like a monument, unshaken, whole. Their daughter slept in her arms, and Juno was singing. Rowan didn't interrupt. He just watched, awed, every time by how someone so vast could hold something so fragile with that much gentleness. He stepped closer, finally, laid his hand on her shoulder. She looked up. "Tired?" he asked. "Always." She shifted, scooting to one side of the chair, no easy task when she took up most of it. "Come sit," she said. "There's no room." "There's always room." He smiled and slid in beside her, one leg draped over hers, his head resting against her upper arm. She adjusted the blanket around the baby. The child's breath was soft, steady. For a long time they sat like that, pressed together in imperfect symmetry, built from different blueprints, joined by something neither species nor society had words for. Not just survival, not just love, a new origin. Outside, the forest shimmered. The elders had never officially declared the child a miracle. No ceremonies had been held. But people visited now, quietly, respectfully, bringing woven trinkets, sweet fruit, and soft-wrapped cloths. No one said much, but they watched. They remembered. And slowly, the word unparable disappeared from the records. It was replaced by something else. Untested, unmeasured, unknown. Juno liked that better. After all, she'd spent her whole life being defined by limits. Now she was something else entirely, and in the space between too much and not enough, she had become home.